Hi, welcome everyone. Just going to give everyone a moment to join. All right. Thank you so much for coming today. Really excited to welcome you all to this session. We'll be discussing the roles of a script coordinator and a writer's assistant, as well as discussing some of our program, the Writers Access Support Staff Training Program. I know that we have some people on this call who might be new to our organization, the Writers Guild Foundation. So just to give you a little bit of background, our organization, WGF, it's our goal to preserve and promote the history and the craft of writing for the screen. And we do this through our library, through our various events, and in this case, through our community programs. So our Writers Access program, it's specifically geared towards emerging TV writers who are interested in pursuing support staff roles like that of the writer's assistant and script coordinator. And it's specifically geared towards folks from underrepresented backgrounds. So that could be BIPOC writers, LGBTQ plus writers, writers with disabilities, writers over 50. And I am very excited to welcome our moderators for the night who are with the HiveMind Unified. I'll allow them to do their own introductions, but thank you again so much for coming. And I'd say Kareema and Shirlyn, please feel free to take it away.
Sure. Thank you so much, Kira. And thank you to the Writers Guild Foundation for partnering with us on this amazing event. Hey, everyone. My name is Kareema B. I am the founder of the HiveMind Unified, which is a global exchange of information to advance the careers of the melanated community in entertainment. We're super excited to be doing this workshop today on TV support staff basics. And we have been doing a lot of work throughout the year in different forms to help everyone come together, especially with regards to their career. So with that being said, Shirlyn, Cesar, please let them know what we do, what we're about.
Yes, thank you, Kareema. So hi all, Shirlyn here, head of content at the HiveMind Unified. And look, before we end this conversation or start the conversation, I want to ask you guys to please make a note to check us out on Instagram, our Instagram page, the HiveMind Unified. There you can find our IG Live series, the Resource Roundup, 20-minute conversations, featured one of our speakers coming soon, gave some great information that you can learn from and get some amazing details there. You can also head to our website, thehivemindunified.org. There you will find two important things. One, a resources page, long list of organizations, foundations, all the things that might help you along your journey to excel in your career. The second thing is our office hours page where you can book 10 minutes to talk to a working professional and ask your dying questions. The other thing is we do workshops like this. Welcome, thank you. And our podcast where all podcasts are. Take a listen. It's called Coffee, Tea, and Drinks. And I will shout out that one of our episodes features the Vanessa Williams. Okay, that is all. With that, I would like to dive right into this amazing conversation and all of the things that we're going to learn tonight. So let me go ahead and introduce our guest. First up is Debbie Ezer. Debbie is a writer who has also worked as a scripts coordinator and writer's assistant in television on network and cable dramas, as well as single camera and multi-camera comedies. She is a recovering attorney, former SAT math instructor, I needed you, and retired improv comedy performer who always endeavors to present the material in an organized, efficient, and hopefully entertaining fashion. Clay, up next. Clay Lapari is a longtime script coordinator, writer's assistant with credits including Community, WandaVision, and iCarly Reboot. Welcome, Debbie and Clay. It is an absolute pleasure to have you. So I want to dive right in and start the conversation with you sharing with us, why did you want to be a writer? What drew you to this very unique and interesting path? And Debbie, love to start with you.
Sure. So this will be a little repetitive if anyone saw the IG Live, because my answer is still the same. I have just always been a storyteller. And that was true from a young age. I was the kid who took my crayons and my paper and wrote short stories starting when I was like 6 or 7 years old. It's just always been a passion. And when I went off to college, one of my majors was history, which to me was a form of storytelling, and that's what attracted me to it. And I pursued law because I saw that as a form of persuasive storytelling. But ultimately, when I dove into the practice of law, I was lucky enough to spend the year following law school clerking for a federal judge, which was an insane amount of work. And I learned more in a year than I think I'll ever learn again. And I went off to practice. I discovered that I really missed creative pursuits and using that part of my brain. So it was actually my first week at the law firm that I signed up for my first TV writing class at UCLA. I had taken a screenwriting class my last semester of college. And so my entire time practicing, I just kept taking classes and writing more scripts, and ultimately decided that it was my dream. And if I didn't take a chance, then I would always regret it. So I jumped out of law and into the world of TV.
Love that. Love that. Clay, what about you?
Sure. Well, from a very early age, I knew I wanted to work in TV. I wasn't sure exactly in what capacity. And I remember as a kid, I would tell people I want to work in TV, and they'd be like, "Oh, you want to be a news anchor?" And I'd be like, "No, there's so much more than that." Right. And then I went to college, and by the time I got in college, I thought I wanted to edit. I was really into editing and storytelling that way. And then while I was in college, I started doing sketch comedy with some friends. And through that process, I started to realize that I really enjoyed writing and coming up with ridiculous ideas. And so by the time I graduated, I had a new focus, and moved to Los Angeles right after graduation to pursue that. I did go to Emerson College, but I will be very clear right off the bat, I do not think you do not need a degree in television production to pursue any job in television production. So if you're hung up on that at all, free yourself from that concern, because I do not think it's necessary.
I think what's encouraging about both of your stories is that either for those listening, you can either know and pursue that thing straight out the gate, or you can do something. Either way, there's success here. And so don't be discouraged no matter where you are, right? So let's go to, all right, so now you've decided I want to be a writer. Let's talk about how we got that first job, and specifically, if there's something that you did that, someone can use now to get into the writer's room, include that. Point that out in your story.
Debbie?
You want me to go first? Well, so when I jumped out of law, I knew I would have to start, when you start a new career, you have to start over from the bottom. So I just took my resume and I sent it everywhere I could find for any job at the lower level. Of course, I wanted to be in a TV writer's room, but I knew that getting any kind of assistant experience would make me more legitimate to people who might hire me for a writer's room, because coming from being a lawyer, I knew that there might be some people who might think I would come with attitude or wouldn't be willing to do the actual work, which I totally was. So all of the different, resources that you can think of. I think it was a site called entertainmentcareers.net. I don't know if it's still around, but
yeah, sure.
that was ultimately where I had a really hard time. I didn't have any connections. And I got, an interview off of a blind submission, and it was a screening interview with an executive producer's main assistant. And he needed a second assistant because he had a second reality show. So this was, I was going to scripted, non-scripted. I was just trying to get a job. And she thought highly of me. We connected and had me meet her boss. And he decided he didn't want me as his assistant, but he wanted to help me and give me a shot. So he actually created an additional researcher position on the show, that other show where he needed an assistant. And so I think it was my willingness to, do whatever it took to, get my foot in the door and, showing that I was scrappy that made him want to, give me a shot. And from there, pretty much every job I've had since then has come through somehow, from that show, which ended up getting canceled, as so many do. Someone referred me to be a production coordinator on an indie movie, which I had no experience doing, but I'm a super organized person. And I was able to do the job, I think, well. And then I met a whole other group of people, and I eventually found my way into a writer's room because I'm a friendly sort, and I had a neighbor who worked at an agency who knew that a showrunner was looking for an assistant. And so she passed my resume along. And that's how I ended up getting an interview and getting my foot in the door in scripted TV, was as a showrunner's assistant.
I love that story for so many reasons, including, a lot of times people think it's just based off of like these hard skills. And you spoke a lot about soft skills that are necessary and usually not taught to you, right? But part of your personality and your character that afforded you an opportunity to move forward or move across almost to in your career. So I thought that was really, really cool. Two, I want to kind of for a second also talk about what a writer's room looks like as far as like who is in the room before we narrow in on the specific positions that we'll talk about today.
Sure. Do you want me to talk about that, or Clay, do you want to jump in with your story first?
Yes, Clay first, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so real quick, I moved to Los Angeles in 2001, and I really didn't know anybody, and I did everything Debbie said, entertainmentcareers.net, showbizjobs.com, sites that I'm sure don't exist anymore, sending out my resume to any posting that I could try to find. And I just remember applying to all sorts of shows. Even though I wanted to write for comedy and I wanted to work on sitcoms, I remember I interviewed for an Animal Planet show. I remember I interviewed for Unsolved Mysteries, just lots of shows that weren't what I was looking for, but I would have taken any of these jobs. And I wound up truly, I don't know if it was numbers game, luck, or what, but I wound up on the Jamie Kennedy Experiment, which was an old hidden camera show from, at this point, over 20 years ago. And there was a comedy element to it. It was hidden camera. There were sketches. And I was hired as a PA, or I interviewed for a PA, and they wound up hiring several PAs. And so that was my first entry point into television. And I can tell you, I remember vividly getting the phone call from the person who was hiring, the assistant production coordinator, who called me, and he says, Clay, I think we're going to hire you. Are you ready to do this? I remember the way he said it. Are you ready to do this? And it up until that moment, I was like, yeah, it scared me. I was like, oh no, am I ready to do this? Is this a job? Am I going to be able to be a PA? I truly, for a second, was nervous that I wasn't going to be able to, but I was. I mean, anybody can be a PA. So it's a good lesson of it's not that scary. It's all, the stuff we did 20 years ago is still the stuff you're doing now, copies, runs for supplies, lunches, stuff like that. So then I was, I don't know how far I'll go down the story, but I got hired in the first season. I knew going in that I wanted to write. So I had my eyes on the writer's room. I would socialize with the writers assistants, befriend them, talk to them, and everyone else, all the other PAs were eyes on the set. They wanted to go to set. So I was fortunately the only person on that path. I was hoping that by the end of season 1 for season 2, I'd be promoted to writer's assistant. It didn't happen. They hired someone else. So I stayed as a PA for a second season, continued to work hard, be friendly, be kind, and to network. And in season 3, I got hired as a writer's assistant. So it took me 2 full years, and we're talking 22 plus episodes. So it was 2 real full years as a PA before I was very fortunate to get my first gig. And then to talk about, the question was the types of people and the jobs in a writer's room. And I will speak in regards to comedy only, because that really has been almost exclusively my experience. Typically, in a writer's room, you're going to have the showrunner, and then you'll have the writing staff, which could be anywhere between 2 additional writers to 10 additional writers. The writer's room can really, in terms of the writing staff, can be anywhere between 2 writers to like 12 writers. And then as a part of that group, you have the support staff, which in a typical sitcom is usually a script coordinator and a writer's assistant. There's sometimes a writer's PA, but not always, and that's sort of becoming less and less common. Although now I feel like for a long time it was non-existent, and I kind of feel like maybe we're kind of coming back to that job. I'm not sure. But in terms of positions, that's like what that's the group that you're dealing with, and the writers staff can have staff, the low-level writers who are staff writers, who are beginners, that's all the way up to co-executive producers and executive producers.
And so just specifically in regards to the writer's PA and the writer's assistant position, can we differentiate exactly what is required of each of those roles, and why it
Sure.
is or isn't hard to do the jump from PA to writer's assistant?
So sure. So first of all, writer's PA, like you have really 2, maybe 3 responsibilities as a writer's PA. Number 1 is you're probably going to be responsible for getting everyone's lunches, which means a big chunk of your day is collecting the orders, calling the restaurant, placing the orders, going to physically get the food, check the food, make sure everything's right, and then bring it and deliver it to everybody. That's like a big chunk of your day as a writer's PA. On top of that, you might do an afternoon coffee run, which is just like a lunch run. You just get the orders, you call it, place it, and you go get it. And then beyond that, you might sometimes have to go get production supplies. But a lot of that's done by the production office PAs. Just depends on what's happening, who's available. But truly,
although yeah. I would also say that, I mean, it's on especially multicam comedy that you've worked a lot on, you're all in one place. On the drama side, more and more often the writers' rooms are in LA and they're being shot anywhere from Vancouver to Toronto to New Orleans to, and anywhere else. So it is more common that the writer's PA is responsible for stocking office supplies, for stocking kitchen, of snacks and all of that stuff. Right. And also, I always, when I'm in a writer's office, make a big push to give that writer's PA the opportunity to sit in the room whenever possible, to be the person to cover for the writer's assistant if that person needs to step out, or if there's more than one writer's room, if multiple groups are split up, just so that it doesn't just become solely a gopher job.
Can we talk about why that role is important and the duties that you listed? Because some people might hear that and be like, what? I didn't go to school to get lunch. But why is that so essential to the process and to the writer's room?
It is so essential because in order for a writer's room to function well, I prefer the term CWH. I know some people use hangry, but I call it cranky when hungry. Fed writers make for happy writers, make for good writers who come up with great ideas, who make the show, work. So, when you're making sure the writers are, just at the bare essential, like, they have the fuel that they need to do their job well then you're helping to make the writer's room function. But at the same time, through doing these kinds of jobs where you're the person who is in charge of getting the orders and finding out people's preferences and doing what might feel like menial tasks, getting the people, like finding out what kind of personal office supplies they prefer, you're going to be able to develop individual relationships with each writer. And that's so key. That's what getting your foot in the door in a writer's room gives you the opportunity to do. You want to be able to get to, show these people who you are so that you'll form relationships with some of them so that you'll earn the opportunity down the line at the end of the season to say, hey, I have this script. Would you be willing to give it a read? And you want these people to be impressed with your work ethic and your commitment to the show so that when it comes time maybe to promote someone to writer's assistant, or they get their own show, which happens often, they'll think of you and bring you along to their writer's room. Clay, did I miss anything?
Well, no, but I'll also add that it's the role of a writer's PA is important also because of time, because writing a TV show is very hard, and you have a finite amount of time to write your scripts. You have 6 weeks of pre-production, or you have 6 months for a whole season of a show. But these writers are working and they work long hours. And a lot of times you work through lunch. And so as a writer's PA who's going to get the food and delivering it, you're saving time, you're allowing all that extra time to be spent being creative and writing, as opposed to everyone disappearing for an hour to go finding their own lunch, buying their own food, and then taking another half hour to kind of rev back up and get back on track of where we were before we broke. So, it's not a glamorous job, but it is important.
So, okay, I'm a writer's PA. I showed how efficient I was. And, I remember that you like, milk in your coffee and 2 sugars, not 3. And you remember me. And I am clear and vocal about the fact that I want to be a writer's assistant. And I understand, thank you for sharing your story, Clay, that it might not happen in one season. But when that jump happens, I'm going to go from running around to doing what?
Very different jobs.
Yes. So when you are the writer's assistant in the room, essentially you are the recorder of the room, basically. And the way I like to refer to it is you're the kid in class who can never not pay attention. It is your job to take notes and keep a record of all of the story development as it goes forward. And especially, and this happens on the drama side as well. I've worked both sides, but I'm primarily in drama. But line pitches, so important that when someone starts pitching lines, sometimes they'll even start pitching a whole conversation. You've got to get it down. And you've got to be able to be focused and be in tune. And that is the primary responsibility of being a writer's assistant, is being that recorder of the room. There are other tasks outside the room. You'll have to clean up the notes at the end of each day or night or whatever. You also may be called upon to help provide you and the script coordinator like additional materials for the show. And what I mean by that is, especially in this digital age where you can freeze frame and read everything that's on the screen. If there's a newspaper article on a that some character is looking at on a laptop, someone's got to write that. And it doesn't typically fall to the writer of the episode. It's usually someone on the writing support staff who's going to handle writing those kinds of supplemental materials. And that, it's not necessarily going to be an opportunity to shine and show how great your writing is, because not everyone's necessarily going to read, from the writing staff is going to read it, but it's your chance to show what a team player you are, how great you can be at getting things done and taking things off the writer's plate or the showrunner's plate. So tasks like that.
Yeah, and I'll just add for a little context, just to imagine a writer. The writer's room essentially it's a large room with dry erase boards on most of the walls, and often a television monitor or 2 that are in the room. And again, this is what it's like certainly in comedies. And as a writer's assistant and as a script coordinator, you are alternating shifts to taking notes. So it certainly happens where you're the only person taking notes for a 12-hour day, but more than likely you are sort of taking like 3-hour shifts. But you're the only person really at a computer who's taking all these notes that Debbie's talking about, and your screen is mirrored or projected onto a monitor for everyone to see. So your work is on display. And some people take getting used to that because maybe they're a little self-conscious about their typing or their spelling. And it's like something that you just have to learn quickly to just get over and not worry about, because it's not a big deal if you're an average typist or a subpar speller. Like none of these things are going to prevent you from doing this job, unless you allow it to prevent you from doing this job. And just one thing to add, Debbie's talking, and she kind of said this, but when you're taking the notes, she says it's incredibly important, and it's unfortunate that you can't daydream, right? You are focusing. And when you're getting this stuff down, especially with jokes, you have to be verbatim, especially with jokes. Like with just an idea, you can kind of internalize that and write that down, how you interpret the concept for the idea. But when someone's pitching dialogue, especially jokes, you have to like nail it, because jokes are crafted.
And I'll just quickly add that it's true that you, in comedy rooms, you switch off between the writer's assistant and the script coordinator shifts of taking notes. That is not true in a drama room. In a drama room, the roles are delineated or separate. Mm-hmm. On every show I've ever been on, the script coordinator is part of the writer's room whenever that role does not require that the script coordinator be off working on a script or something. But it's the writer's assistant who is taking the notes. Of course, if the writer's assistant needs to step away and go to the restroom or do something, the script coordinator will always jump in and help out. But that is a difference between comedy and drama, is that those roles are more separate.
Okay, for the writer's assistant, because you kind of hinted on a few things, and I just want you to expand on it a little bit. Can you talk about lifestyle? Like, is this a 9-to-5 job? Clay, you said 12 hours that you could possibly be taking notes and alternating. So can you just talk a little bit about that for both a writer's assistant and a script coordinator, what the lifestyle people should expect doing that job?
Sure. I'll start again speaking in terms of comedy. And in comedy, there's multicam and there's single cam. In general, I think you have to prepare for a 12-hour day minimum. It's not always going to be a 12-hour day. Certainly in the early days, where you're breaking stories and production hasn't begun yet, you might roll in at 9 as a writer's assistant. The writers might show up at 10 to get working, and you might wrap at 5. The writers might go home at 5, and then you stick around for an hour to kind of clean up your notes and distribute them. But as the season goes on and production begins, it is very common to be in at 9 a.m. and then stay as late as 1 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning, depending on how the episode is going. Does the script need a significant rewrite? Like, did you just have a table read and did every joke bomb? And you cannot go home until you have revised and rewritten this full script, where it's all hands on deck, and you're ordering a third meal or breakfast. There are nightmare scenarios where you're staying till 4 in the morning, 6 in the morning. Those are extreme. I think you have to prepare once you're in production for in comedy for like a 9 a.m. to like 9 p.m. day. I know that's not possible for everyone. I know people, I'm a father, I have 2 kids. I know that people have medical issues, and I think that prevent you from working those long hours. And I think those are just conversations to have with showrunners in advance while you're interviewing. And I do think I think showrunners are willing to work with you in those scenarios. But it is very much the norm. Debbie?
Yeah, I was going to say that was my experience working comedy versus drama, is that whenever, whether it's multicam and you have a run through, and with both single cam and multicam, you have table reads. And like Clay said, you're always going to be there late the night of a table read because you're punching up jokes. But late could be, if it went pretty well, late could be 8 o'clock. I think my latest night when I was on the comedy series I was on was like between 1 and 2. And that's because we had to really rehaul an episode. So that does happen. Happens less often on the drama side, that you'll get a writer's room going those, super long hours going super late. What generally happens in drama is that you'll more consistently have just standard, 10 to 5, 10 to 6 days in the writer's room. Pretty rare that you're meeting as a writer on a weekend day on a drama. And actually, in my experience on a comedy as well, it does happen. But I would say that for lifestyle as a writer's assistant, you can on the drama side, you can more consistently count on, knowing what your schedule may be like. You may have late nights cleaning up notes just because it was a lot that day and there's a lot to go through. Or it might be a day where you finish breaking an episode in the room. And what's pretty common on the drama side is that you will then be asked to sort of make what's called a pre-outline, which is basically taking the notes that you took from all of the days of that episode and putting them together into the beats of that episode so that the writer has a document with everything organized. And that takes a long time. It's a lot of work. So that can be a late night. but I think that there's a little bit more predictability when you're a drama writer's assistant, at least from my experience, because I've done both writer's assistant and script coordinator on the drama and comedy side. And I would say, and we will get to talking in a minute about what a script coordinator does, but I would say script coordinator on the drama side is way more unpredictable in terms of hours and lifestyle.
I would also just add again for context, like think about this is one reason why it goes late, right? It's not just because of people are procrastinating or disorganized, but let's say, you know, a script has gone out the night before and the director and the cast show up Tuesday morning, get the script, and they start rehearsing the script on set. They're working as a group. The writers aren't down there, but the director is going through the scenes with the cast, and they'll go all morning learning the lines, blocking, figuring things out, so that by 2 o'clock, there can be a run through where the writers go down and watch the script on its feet from beginning to end. And that itself, that process is going to take at least 45 minutes to an hour, depending, you know, moving from set to set, watching it, digesting what you're watching. It's now 3 or 4 o'clock, and you go back to the writer's room to now rewrite the script based off of what you watched. And you're only able to start rewriting at 4 or 5 p.m. And you can't go home until you have done a rewrite for the process to start over again the next morning. So it's just by design, you have to stay late because there's only so many hours in the day. Now, there are scenarios where writer's assistants might stagger. If you're lucky, doesn't happen a lot, but like a writer's assistant, one might show up at like 9 and work until like 12, and maybe the script coordinator had a late night and they're rolling in at noon to sort of come in and they've had some time to recover. Those kind of things can happen. Those discussions, you can talk about that in advance. That can happen.
I think it's, yeah, thank you. Always fair to give people a, you know, they know what kind of timeline and space they're walking into, and the commitment and just the type of pacing of television. Television works incredibly quickly, and so you're always going. So before we, you know, jump into some of the things that, you know, you'll be showing us and sharing your screen and, you know, getting that inside scoop, just deeper, like break down for us what that script coordinator role is, because if there is a position that might be working overnight to get that script to the production office to run those copies, because that was me as the office and it's that script coordinator. So what are they doing, and why is it, you know, why are they crucial, and why did, you know, and so people can understand why the steps before that role, you know, why all that leads up to that.
So basically, the way I shorthand a script coordinator is, and this oversimplifies it, but a script coordinator is essentially the copy editor of a show. The script coordinator is responsible for formatting and proofreading every piece of material that goes out of the writer's office. And that is typically something called a story area, which is an initial, usually 1 or 2 page document that sort of just describes for the studio and the network, this is what this episode is going to be about. And then there are outlines which break down scene by scene in more detail what the episode will be about. And then you get to the script stage with all of the various drafts that go out, a studio draft or a network draft or a studio/network draft, and into all the various drafts you have with production and revisions and so forth. So it's, you know, a script coordinator has to have impeccable proofreading skills and the really great knowledge of final draft or whatever script writing program is being used on that show in order to be able to properly format. You also need to be able to maintain continuity, both within the episode. So between drafts, if things are, you know, cut or added or moved around, you have to be that set of eyes that make sure that if something was introduced on page 16 and then called back on page 33, but then we cut it on page 16, but the callback on 33 is still there, you got to flag that and, you know, make sure that it is revised so that it makes sense. You also need to make sure there's continuity among episodes and among seasons. So you have to really be the brain that maintains all the knowledge of the show. So that if we established in season 1 that a certain character is from Rhode Island, we can't have somebody in season 2 saying, oh yeah, so-and-so from New Hampshire, because that's not gonna fly. And so you've got to make sure that you're following those kinds of details. A script coordinator is also the hub of many different departments. As a script coordinator, you're dealing with casting, you need to work hand in glove with production. And one of the lessons Clay and I teach is just about the importance of communication, because the flow of information is so important, that you are letting production know what you know about when scripts are coming, and if there are going to be scenes affected that work that day or the next day. It's just really important that you have good communication and relationships with people in production, with people in post. As script coordinator, you're dealing with what are called clearances. Every script goes to a research company, and they flag things that the legal person covering the show may or may not find problematic. And if things have to change, you're the one who has to make sure they get changed. So there's just a lot that you're juggling, in addition to dealing with business affairs. You're doing a lot of script paperwork. There's a whole variety of script paperwork that you deal with as script coordinator. So it's just a lot to keep track of. And so being detail oriented and organized is critical.
No, that's super important. I wasn't even aware a script coordinator deals with business affairs. So that was something new to me. I would love to go into our interactive component, actually see these positions in action. So what would you like to start with, the script coordinator or writer's assistant?
Start with the writer's assistant and the notes.
Okay, let's do it.
I'll share my document that we just an introduction to what this is. Through our program, the Writers Access Support Staff Training Program, one of our interactive courses, or interactive exercises, thank you, is note-taking process, where Debbie and I will sort of act as a writing staff, pitching out thoughts and ideas, and some of the people will be physically taking notes of what we're talking about. So this is an example of one of those brainstorm sessions that we did one day.
And this is a really good example of well-organized notes. This was the second time, I believe, we ran this, we call these blue sky writer's room exercises. And, it's, what was discussed is really clearly evident by being able to read through what's on the page. It's visually well organized. You can see there are things that are bolded or highlighted to be able to emphasize, where, we may have landed, which is a term of art that we use when we hit something that the showrunner is like, 2 thumbs up, we're using that. We call that landing on something. So.
Right, and so in this particular instance, we were just brainstorming, I think, drama ideas, maybe comedy ideas. And so every person in the class would put their name next to their set of notes. And that's what this is. So this is Brandon. And, we talk about the use of bullet points and how there's no one set way to keep notes. It's whatever works for you, is clear, that you can read. Like, here are some great examples of where Brandon wrote out like paragraphs, like actual prose of like what we were landing on, as opposed to bullets. And you learn this. You learn what works for you. Bolding, underlining, italics.
And I believe Brandon actually went back after the fact on his own, and like, you'll see that these are paragraphs because he went and cleaned up his notes.
One of our star pupils, Brandon.
Totally.
And just keep in mind, these notes are daily, and at the end of the day, you send them to the writers to read. And a lot of times they don't read the notes, but sometimes they do read the notes. And at some point they will go back and ask for the notes. So they may not read it the next night, but in like 2 weeks, they might say, hey, remember that talk about Sohani and gold or whatever? Like, where are those notes? And as the writers read these notes and see your notes, they may have suggestions on how you could do a better job. Say, I'm having a hard time processing how you've done this. Can you break it up a little more? Can you be a little more clear? And you just need to have this dialogue with your showrunner about the best way that they want it, because every showrunner does their thing different. And it's all about adapting from show to show on how they like things done. And see, everyone has different styles.
And it's not about how you like it best. I mean, you start off, obviously you take the notes the way you want them, but if you get a request from writers, or especially the showrunner, the answer is always yes. of course, I will adapt. I will, format things the way you prefer.
Mm-hmm. I'll look a little red here. Come on, that's pretty.
Love it.
So that's an example of a blue sky note. And blue sky, like Debbie said, blue sky is sort of like term for like when anything goes. Like whatever you can think of is good at this point. It's early enough that we can just say anything we want. And as time goes on, the blue sky gets a little darker and a little more focused on like parameters on where you're headed season wise and stuff like that. Yeah,
And then do you want to pull up the grid?
Sure. So this next document is one of many responsibilities as a script coordinator. Again, this is something that's done mostly on comedies. I think I don't think they're that common on dramas, but it's something that's basically called like an episode grid, which it's sort of your responsibility as a script coordinator to track the process and progress of each episode. So this is something that was from Punky Brewster, the Punky Brewster reboot that I got to work on. This is just a grid it's sort of a living document that changes all season long, where you have over here, you have your episode numbers. So this is season 1. We did 10 episodes. This is not a fully filled out document, as you'll see, but as the shows are broken, the stories are broken, they'll start to get titles. And like Debbie described, an episode will go through many stages before it's shot. And the first is a 1-pager or a story area. And this document tracks when that document went to the studio, which is indicated with an S, on March 20th. And then when it went to the network a few days later on March 24th. And then after it's approved, the writer goes off to outline. And this is the date that the outline was turned in. And then it becomes a studio draft, which is a script that goes to just the studio. And then they have notes. And then it becomes a network draft and goes to the network and the studio. And the network has notes. And then once those notes are in, these are outlines. Sorry, studio and network outlines. You do all that with outlines. But then you go to the writer's draft, right? Sorry, I got a little ahead of myself. The writer's draft is the first draft. The writer has gone off with the notes from the outlines to do a first draft. And it's turned in on May 4th. And then the studio draft and the network draft happens. Once all the notes are addressed in draft form, it's ready to be table read. So it's called a table draft. It's what you read at the table with the cast and everyone's there. And then it goes through many more revisions until finally becoming a shooting draft, which is what you shoot. And there are sometimes revisions. But this is just a grid that helps keep track of where you are in the process, the shoot dates, who's directing, who wrote the episode. And this also usually lives on a dry erase board as well, so that everyone in the room can see it. And they don't have to ask you to pull it up. They can just look and see where they are.
Yeah, and on a drama, we always have one of those giant dry erase boards, usually in a hallway somewhere, just outside the writer's room. And sometimes the script coordinator will update it. Sometimes the showrunner's assistant. Just basically whoever is handy with the dry erase markers. And but on the drama side, I typically did not have to maintain this kind of physical version of the grid document.
And this is just one example. They look a million different. They're all basically the same thing, but they all look different. Ignore the highlighting and stuff. But there's nothing more satisfying than just like checking off or scratching one down.
Yep.
Very satisfying
so satisfying.
Make your way through the season.
Wow, this is incredibly helpful and insightful. I mean, everyone in the chat definitely agrees, but it's amazing to see just how organized both roles, both people in the roles need to be in order for them to be successful at this job and even be considered to be a staff writer, which is what I would think either a script coordinator or writer's assistant would hope for. When it comes to trajectory though, is it that you're a writer's PA and then you're like, I want to be a writer's assistant so that I can get assigned an episode and be a staff writer? Or is it, you should definitely go be a script coordinator before you get assigned an episode? Like, how does that work if there is a trajectory at all in the writer's room?
Should I take this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's a million different trajectories. I feel like it's unpredictable. for a million reasons. And first, I just want to reiterate the fact that writers' PAs are not on every show. So like, when you think of, I want to be a writer's PA, also equate that with, I want to be a production office PA. Like, if there is no writer's PA, try to get a production office PA. But in terms of trajectory, so typically in an ideal situation, we're talking ideal situation, you know, you get hired as a PA on season 1, and you've expressed your goals and aspirations, and you made really great connections. And on season 2, they promote you to writer's assistant, and you prove yourself as a writer's assistant. And then hopefully there's a 3rd season, and you are able, there's upward mobility on the show. You have a showrunner who likes to promote, and you get the script coordinator. Script coordinator, if you're going to get an episode to write on comedies, again, it's probably going to happen as the script coordinator is more likely going to get an opportunity to write a script before the writer's assistant. On iCarly, the showrunner was very generous and gave both me, the script coordinator, and the writer's assistant episodes, separate episodes, which is it's almost not unheard of, but it's very uncommon, but great. If you prove yourself to be like, to have executed well in your draft and to have been helpful and willing to invaluable during the rewrite process, and you haven't like gotten all frustrated and mad that they're changing your script, and you haven't been difficult, and you've been very sort of like team player, and you've proven that you're good with that process. If there's a 4th season, and if there's money in the budget, and maybe there's chairs available at the table, I mean, maybe some writers went off on different shows and there are slots available, then you are potentially in the running to get staffed. The problem is, because there are problems, you are only going to make that jump from one season to the next. It's very uncommon to make the jump mid-season, unless for some reason the script coordinator quit and got fired and they've suddenly promoted you. But otherwise, you're going to make that jump from season to season. And so you're really counting on the fact that your show that you're on is going to go long enough to get those opportunities. If you're a writer's assistant on a show and it gets canceled, it's very difficult and unlikely that you're going to be able to go onto a new show as script coordinator. You're probably going to get hired on the next show as a writer's assistant because that's what you've done. And you're going to hope that the new show goes the second season and then you can get promoted. And I won't bore everyone with my personal story and trajectory, but I am what I consider a very much a cautionary tale, where I had some quick upward mobility early. From Jamie Kennedy, I got to writer's assistant and got canceled. I then got hired on a UPN show called Eve. The rapper Eve had a show. I got hired on the second season of that as a writer's assistant and got promoted to script coordinator on the third season. And as script coordinator, I got a script. And this is like, at this point, probably maybe 4.5 years of my personal trajectory. I felt like I was on the path to success. The writing staff really liked me. My episode went really well. And then unexpectedly, the WB and the UPN merged to become the CW, and all the shows on these networks just disappeared overnight. And I found myself as script coordinator. And then I went for years from one season show to one season show to one season show to one season show. And years went by. And along the way, I got to write a lot of episodes. I'm very fortunate, but it wasn't until, hold yourselves back, but it wasn't until 20 years later. I pursued this for 20 years as support staff, working with people who'd be like, I'm going to promote you if we get another season and it doesn't get another season. Or writers, showrunners who are very upfront, we're not going to promote you. We're going to hire you, but just so you know, we're not interested in promoting our support staff. And it wasn't until iCarly, where I almost didn't take the job because I was in such a dark place, to be perfectly honest, that I took it, got an episode, it went really great, and they staffed me on the second season. And so it ultimately happened for me. And I am a cautionary tale. There are certainly examples of people who got a writer's assistant job on season 2 of How I Met Your Mother, and by season 7 was executive, co-EPing How I Met Your Mother. It happens, but on one hand it does, and on the other hand, it is a slog. And it's important that you know that that's a possibility. And if you don't want that to be a possibility, then I suggest being open to the idea of pursuing this path, but putting a limit on it and saying, look, I'm going to do this for 2 seasons. And if I make it that way, I'm going to make it that way. And if I don't, then I'm going to pivot and I'm going to try a different avenue. I'm not willing to commit that much time. But I blinked and like, you know.
I love the story, Clay. Can I say thank you for enduring and persevering so that somebody, including me, in this webinar can be encouraged by everything that you went through to get to where you are now? Because a lot of people think it just comes easy to certain people, and it certainly did not come easy to you. So thank you so much, because I saw someone in the chat, sorry if I'm not getting the name, who was asking if they were being exploited because it had been 4 years that they have been a PA and they still, haven't been able to make that jump yet. And the answer is, could very well be true.
Maybe.
And,
but also maybe not.
And probably not,
Right.
20 years is a long time to pursue your dream. Go ahead, Shirlyn.
No, I just wanted to say thank you as well, and just put a little stamp or a point on the fact that one of the reasons that HiveMind exists is to get information like this to people who aren't fully aware, because we think if you get the cheat codes earlier, then you can better navigate what that is, including parts of our, workshops that is sharing a screen and seeing a document that you never likely would have had access to, and identifying and giving a title to that, so that when you show up super green, not knowing what it is, when someone names that document or says that thing, you're going to say, wait a minute, you're going to have a call back to this conversation and say, I recall and I remember what that is. So thank you for that. And I did want to, and thank you, Kara, for putting that, short list of those questions in there, because I did want to kind of segue into, some resume pointers. But before that, just, and showing those documents, okay, you're like, you're green. Is there like a example that someone is giving you so you're the writer's assistant and this is your first time, and it's like, all right, get those notes, and you are detail oriented and maybe you prefer this, bullet points versus dashes or whatever, but like, will someone give you like, this is an example, go this way. Your script coordinator, this is the previous grid, go this way.
Right.
Just
and
easier.
And with that question, sorry, Debbie, I think it'll be a good transition to talk about your program and why it even exists. Because having that training, right, what you're talking about, Shirlyn, it's important. So.
Yeah, so I will say, especially on a first season show, there is not going to be any kind of example document or template or anything that someone is going to provide for you. You're going to be expected to resource that yourself or already have that, from experience. And, but in terms of taking the notes, and, it's perfectly reasonable and a good thing to do once you start taking notes, check in with the showrunner and say, hey, is there anything that, you'd like me to do differently, or anything, just basically checking in about, like, if you'd like me to adjust my style at all, please let me know. I'm totally open and ready to, adjust to whatever you prefer. If you jump into a second season of a show, for sure, there's going to be that kind of support. You'll be able to look at previous seasons' notes. If you're the script coordinator, there will already be established templates for all of the documents that go out of a writer's room, outlines and scripts and so forth. But, as Kareema was saying, it's the perfect segue into why the Writers Access Support Staff Training Program exists, because it's this catch-22 of these jobs get posted saying, if they get posted at all, saying we want somebody with experience, but how the hell are you supposed to get the experience if they, if they will only hire someone who's done it before and you've never done it? So that's the piece that our program is aiming to solve, because the training program that Clay and I teach gives you that experience in a training program form. Every single person who went through our program last year is a phenomenal note taker, whether they started as one or not, because they got so much practice. We did, a bunch, at least I think 4 with each class, of these blue sky rooms, getting used to sharing your screen. That's a comedy thing. You typically don't share your screen in a drama room, but it's really good practice to, you know, try to let go of any of your nervousness about sharing your screen. And we, you know, as part of the training program, you also get experience, you know, doing in practicing the tasks that a script coordinator needs to do. We have templates that we share with people. We have all of that support that we provide as well. After the program, we've been lucky enough to get grads placed in different jobs, and Clay and I make ourselves available so that, you know, I'll get texts sometimes on an evening or a weekend or during the day with someone who's like, wow, what do I do in this situation? And, you know, Clay and I together, he'll share the number of years he did the job, but I won't, because Hollywood is ageist, especially with women. So I'll just say it's a really long time. But together we have so much experience that there's barely a situation, I think, that we possibly haven't encountered. And we happily support our grads and provide that advice, so that we're trying to break down those barriers so that people who have never had any experience in writers' rooms can come through the program and be confident going into a writer's room that they can just kill it in there.
Yes.
That's amazing. What else can you tell us about the program? I think there was a few questions actually pertaining to it. Any tips on writing a compelling personal statement, or anything else that people should know?
Do you want to jump in, Clay, or do you want me to?
This is tough. I mean, I can tell you a little bit about the process. Yeah, and when we launched last year, and we put out the sign up, we got a lot of applications. We got 2,200 applications, which exceeded all of our expectations. And so we had to call in a lot of extra people to come in and read applications, submissions. And so what that resulted in was sort of like, I don't know how many people, let's say 20 people, each reading 90 applications. Everyone participating in this sort of was looking for different things, right? You know, I can tell you for Debbie and I, we were looking as working script coordinators, we were looking for, you know, does this person have a relatively clear understanding of what a support staff is, like might understand that there is a support staff in a writer's room, understands that they may have to put in some time and some work in a support staff role before getting a real writing opportunity? Or is the person just like hyper focused on, I want to write, get me in so I can write, without really maybe having a clear understanding of this step that we are trying to help have access to. So that's what we were looking, but other people were much more interested in you know, their history of like their backstory and where they're from and their passion for writing. So it's a long way of saying, I don't know if I have great advice because I don't know who's going to be reading your application. Debbie, please help me.
Yeah, I would say, you know, as Clay referenced, and I think there will be a little bit more uniformity this year. I do think it's very important as part of your personal statement to demonstrate an understanding that this application is for a program to train to be writing support staff. Everybody wants to jump in and be a writer in the writer's room. And, you know, I wish everyone could walk on the field and immediately become a writer. That would be amazing. And for some people, they get to skip this step, and that's awesome. But what I will say is that being in a room as support staff is invaluable in learning how a writer's room operates, in learning how to navigate so that when you do get that shot as a staff writer, as Clay can tell you from his experience, it was just fun. And you know, it wasn't the same kind of pressure that it would be for someone who'd never been in a room before. So if you can demonstrate in your application that you are enthusiastic about training to take on this role, that's going to go a long way, I think, toward differentiating your application. And I think there were also some questions about, you know, resumes and how to present yourself if you don't have any experience. And let me hopefully allay any concerns. The less experience you have, I think the better in terms of having worked in entertainment, because the whole point of this program is to open these positions up to people who never would have had the opportunity otherwise. Of course, we want to know that you've been pursuing writing, that this is, a passion and a goal, and that you're disciplined and you have a focus for it. Personally, I spent 2 years writing scripts before I ever tried to get a job in a writer's room, and wrote a whole bunch of scripts because I wanted to make the most of my shot once I restarted my career. But, whatever that means to you, just basically a demonstration of a commitment to this career path.
I'll just to add to that, that's a great point, Debbie. And you reminded me that something that when I was looking through my stack of applications, I wanted to see some sort of effort to have tried to get into Hollywood, whether, and have hit walls, right? Because this program is for people who don't have access to certain people or certain opportunities that, someone else might, and who has come time and time again, come up against these walls and felt overlooked. And if you can show me that, I did this and I tried this, but this didn't happen. And that's going to go a long way with me. It doesn't mean you had to have moved to LA.
No, for sure not.
But if you have pursued this particular avenue of being support staff, maybe you've been a PA for a few years and you have tried to become a writer's assistant and you haven't been able to make that jump. They've hired other people and they haven't hired you, or you're now on your 5th show. That's something that's going to stand out to me. Again, it doesn't mean you have to have production experience, but if you have sent out 100 resumes and you've gotten 10 interviews, but no one keeps hiring you, and you feel like it's because it's unfair and that's something that's going to catch our eye too.
Mm-hmm. Is this virtual? Is it a virtual program?
It is. It's on Zoom.
Okay.
And I would also say that there are so many, and Kareema, you mentioned this early at the top of our time together. There are so many skills that are transferable. You don't have to have specific experience doing these jobs in a writer's room. I had done assistant work. I worked every, summer, and I worked when I was in college as I did clerical work, and all of that work, prepared me because I was organized. I was able to, I knew how to, schedule meetings and do all that from other industries, but it all transferred over, in addition to those soft skills of, just being able to know how to make myself somewhat indispensable, because I could anticipate, needs and, just try to be that person who was the team player, making people's lives easier in the writer's office.
And just so concretely, if I'm building my resume and I, because 2,200, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I don't get in this season, and I try again, and maybe I get in the next, but I need a job in between. And so now I'm looking for a PA and write. You're saying don't be scared to put the positions that you do have, but from this conversation, you can gather all of the things that you are required to do. So you can highlight how you are detail oriented. You can highlight how you're a go-getter. You can highlight all of these specific traits to get that specific job, even though you were working at, I was going to say Abercrombie & Fitch, but that's because I watched the documentary. It was really good. Anyway.
but that's exactly right. It's exactly right.
Okay. And just so, people can clearly know.
Yeah. I started this conversation saying that, the guy asked me, are you ready to be a PA? And I was like, I don't know, am I ready? And I said, yes, anybody can be a PA. I think anybody can be a writer's assistant I think anybody can be a writer's assistant if you have the tool. The whole point of this is to give the people the tools to then to do the job well, right? If you can focus and take notes, you're going to get better on the job. I was not a good writer's assistant in the beginning. I'm not a naturally organized person at home. I'm very disorganized, but I'm able to put all that in. I know how to put that energy into the job and to do the work. But if we can help you get to that level to start. if you don't have those skills or the knowledge yet, we can get you to the point where you will by the time we start submitting you for work.
Okay.
So it's before you get to that step, it's about like, how serious are you about this? How committed, you know, how much do you want this that you would be willing to go the support staff route?
Okay. Okay. So then really quickly, let's talk about money. How much we taking home? What are we doing?
So for union covered positions, and what I mean by that, so Clay and I were, the way we met actually was we were part of the organizing committee that unionized writers, assistants, and script coordinators in Los Angeles back in 2017. And I am so proud that so in our initial contract, the rates were super, super low. It was the best we could get with the first contract. And as of the new contract that went into effect last year, the hourly rate of $23.50 is the minimum that you can be paid for a writer's assistant or script coordinator job that is union covered. And now that won't necessarily be New York position, like New York writers' rooms currently are not unionized. So that won't necessarily be the rate that you get, although hopefully the competition is making it harder to try to lowball people and pay less. Now, you know, within that hourly rate, there's all sorts of negotiating terms that, and we go over that with the classes and also make ourselves available when people are, anytime someone gets a job offer from the program, we talk them through how, you know, negotiating for that job, getting, the standard is a 60-hour work week. So getting that 60-hour work week with that rate. And that's a lot more of a livable wage than the unfortunate $16 an hour that we started at with script coordinators in the first contract. In terms of writer, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, no, finish that. But I
was going to say, in terms of writers PAs, they're not unionized. I believe that the minimum has come up to at least 20 an hour at this point for most shows, I think. I don't know that for sure. You also tend to get a lot of mileage when you're a writer's PA. Of course, there's wear and tear on the car, but and showrunners assistants, I believe, again, not covered by the union contract yet. Hopefully someday in the future. But I believe that those rates were also raised to be competitive with the new union minimums.
Okay. I was going to ask, my follow-up question was, because you're about to get like 2,400 applications this time. What is just a slight little negotiating nugget? So like, let's say, okay, so I'm a writer's PA 3 seasons. I'm a writer's assistant 2 seasons. You're asking me to do it for the 3rd time or the 4th time. What's this conversation? How am I approaching this? Because, you know, production's going to give you what you are getting paid. Really, it's up for you to open your mouth and ask for more. And how does that happen?
Yeah, so especially if you're returning to the same show, you are bringing so much value to that show, to that writer's office, to that production, because you know the mythology of the show, especially if it's a mythology heavy show, if it's a, you know, a procedural, you know, you have been part of that show to, you know the stories that have been used, you know, the way that showrunner works. That, I mean, you can't put a value on that, on making the cogs move smoothly. And you also have that amount of experience doing the job, being expert, and doing a kick-ass job at being a writer's assistant. All of that, you know, you deserve way more than whatever the minimum is in a contract for someone who's just stepping onto the job, you know, for a first time. And, you know, those are the kinds of arguments that I've made, that, you know, others have made. And you just have to stand up for your value and know that you're worth way more than whatever the hourly rate is, no matter what you end up getting paid. But
there's nothing keeping you. Let's say you've been a writer's assistant on the show, got another season, and they're going to keep you as a writer's assistant for the next season. They're not going to promote you. There's nothing stopping you from saying, okay, I'll come back, but can I get an episode? I want an episode. And they might say, we'll think about it. Or yeah, we'll do that. Or no, we're not going to give you an episode. And if, let's say you agree to come back as a writer's assistant and it happens again in the 3rd, you know, at any point you can walk away, which is hard but like, that's where you might get to that point. I can tell you 2 times in my career where I was hired as a writer's assistant. I was script coordinator on Austin and Ally, Disney Channel show. And I was good friends with the showrunners, and who I'm still good friends with, but I got hired. I had worked with them before. They hired me as script coordinator season 1. They knew I wanted to write. Season 2, got a season 2 pickup, and I asked to get staffed. And they didn't promote me. They didn't promote anyone. They did not hire any new writers. And I said, well, I can't stick around and spend another season as script coordinator if I feel like I'm not going to have any upward mobility. And I left. And there's another show where I felt it was not as, I won't say any names, but I quit. Like, there are just times, and I know it's not easy for everyone to walk away from a job, but like, you can ask for staffing. I mean, you can ask for a script. You can ask for a story by. You can say, look, can I get a story by? Can I, there are things that you can try to negotiate on your behalf if they're not going to promote you.
Yeah, I also really quickly, I love this information, and Shirlyn, that was an amazing question, because normally people feel like, yes, I have value, but I don't know how to express how or articulate it. So that was super insightful and important. I'm just noticing quite a few questions in the Q&A. And since we only have like a couple minutes left, I want to see how we can rapid fire some of these. And it applies to all of you, actually. So I'm going to start. Shirlyn, there was some people asking about a showrunner's assistant, and you did this for quite a few years. So can you talk about how a showrunner's assistant is connected to a show?
So,
especially with the writers' room and stuff like that.
Yes. So showrunner's assistant basically has an arm in all things, all departments. So the showrunner is thinking about what's happening in the writer's room for previous episodes, is in post for what has already been shot, and may or may not, or at least the showrunners that I've worked with have popped on set and spent time on what is currently shooting. So guarding their time with the writer's room and or revising scripts and working with the script coordinator to make sure that it is out for the PAs to run the script by our 6 a.m. crew call is usually a lot of my negotiating between departments to make sure that everything is where it's supposed to be, so that the director is ready for rehearsal by 7 a.m. So it's a lot of kind of funneling the paperwork that comes from the writer's room and distributing and making sure the right people have it, making sure department heads have outlines that have already been approved by studio and network, so that let's say if we don't have a script yet, that they can start shopping, if there's costumes or like whatever, they can start kind of building and looking. So it is taking the material from there and distributing to other departments. So you just become a funnel.
Thank you. Debbie, what is the time commitment for this program?
So the time commitment is 1 night a week, 12 weeks. And the class is I can't remember, did we say 2 or 2.5 hours, Clay? I think we said 2.5.
I think it's a 2.5.
With a break built in. It'll be after work, West Coast time. So it'll be a little bit later if you're zooming in from the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's probably going to be a weeknight.
It is going to be a weeknight.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Clay, can you speak to this? Should you have a sample ready when applying for a script coordinator or writer's assistant job?
I don't think you need to. You can. You should always be writing and have samples, but it's seldom that you are asked for one in an interview.
Okay. Debbie, this question is for you only because you mentioned ageism. There's quite a few people who were saying, hey, I'm 50 plus and I'm a little worried because I want to apply to a job or apply to be a writer. I have thoughts about this, but wanted to know, do you have any insight on or a word of encouragement for people who want to pursue this of a certain age?
I mean, I would just say absolutely, like it is never, there is never a bad time to jump in and, try your hand at this. I only make that comment because I feel that pressure sometimes as a female. I mean, I don't know, Clay, if you feel the same way. I can only speak from my experience. And that certain shows I've worked on are more interested in this sort of younger, hipper, thing or perspective. But I think that whatever it is that you bring to the table is yours uniquely. And the way that you prove yourself is you make yourself invaluable in the ideas that you're contributing in the room. Which, I mean, I've never, as a support staffer, I've never been in a room where my ideas haven't been welcomed. So I would just say, don't let, my hangups be your hangups.
Okay, I love it. Clay, can you talk about being in a virtual room quickly versus being in an actual room for the writer's room? Because now some rooms are virtual, which allows people from all over the world to be in one space.
Yes, obviously during COVID, almost all rooms were virtual. I feel like now it's a little hybrid. Some shows are still virtual. Someone asked in the chat, some are starting to be in person. The difference is, you are trapped at a computer monitor. I mean, everything about Zoom to be true. You're staring at a monitor for longer hours than you are when you're in a room where you can look at humans throughout the day. But other than, I mean, it's sometimes harder to do a rewrite because you know how Zoom works. People are trying to talk over each other. It's harder to hear sometimes. You have to maybe ask for people to repeat themselves a little more. But we got to the point going into, because I was working on a show, we went into COVID and we were nervous that it was going to work, and ultimately it kind of did work. And you could basically do everything you did in a writer's room on Zoom. So I don't think it's a lot different. Okay. While also being very different.
Right. Nope. I get it. And that's very insightful. Alex, I think we found a question. Alex had a question. What is your advice for a disabled person with chronic health conditions who knows they can handle the job requirements of a staff writer, but not necessarily, but needs to find a sustainable, safe way to get there? So they might not be able to handle the support staff roles the same for that very reason. Do you have any advice?
I mean, I certainly think, in terms of writer's assistant work, I think, like Clay said, I think anyone can do a writer's assistant job. I mean, I know certainly the stamina involved in being able to do it on a comedy side. If you're going to be on one of those super intense shows that's going to go 12 a day every day, I mean, that just might not be tenable for a lot of people or desirable. But and your mileage may vary. I know someone posted, I've tried to keep up with the chat, but I've done a lousy job because I am also trying to pay attention and focus. But I know, someone has had very different experiences than I have on the drama side in the room. But I would say that I think a drama writer's room is something that is definitely accessible and open to anybody. And I definitely think that becoming a member of a writing staff through that path is a very distinct possibility. So I mean, I wouldn't be discouraged from trying that path.
To be fair to Alex, let me read the entire question. I fit into every category but 50 plus. I'm most worried about the disability piece. I'm physically disabled and use mobility services, a walker and forearm crutches. Prior to this webinar, I knew the gopher aspect to being an assistant would be an issue. You touched on lifestyle regarding the positions of writer's assistant and the rarefied writer's PA. Script coordinator, though more work seems more sedentary and plausible in nature. And then the question was, what is your advice for a disabled person with chronic health conditions who knows they can handle the job requirements of a staff writer, but needs to find a sustainable, safe way to get there? Which I think you addressed some of it, but just so you have.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an important question. It's hard to answer, and I know that it's going to take a showrunner who's going to be willing to work with you, and it's going to take a line producer who's going to understand that how important it is for people with disabilities to have opportunities. And I think we are starting to get into a period of time where more people are conscious of that, and willing to, create opportunities for people with disabilities. And yeah, I mean, you obviously, I guess my advice is to just be upfront with the people you're interviewing with, explaining that you're incredibly capable to do the job. You just need a couple things to help make it happen, and hopefully they will make that happen.
And I think that there is much more openness to being accommodating as necessary, because this pandemic world forced us into Zoom rooms and proved that this can be done. So, one of our grads needs to use a wheelchair, and she kills it with her note taking, and we'll make an incredible writer's assistant on whatever show is smart enough to hire her. So, I know that from friends who I heard from this past year, that there were times when, when COVID rates go up, that they would have to do hybrid rooms, or, that they would just have to switch in and out. Some people were working from home, some people were in the room, and it's a mix of, having a Zoom and people in person, and they make it work. And that's just what needs to happen. And like Clay said, more and more showrunners are, I think, becoming aware that the old ways are unacceptable, and that they need to open themselves up to creating opportunities for people.
And I would say too, though it's still rare, there are shows catered to specific audiences and looking for specific people to work on these shows. Well, how do I find those shows? You read the trades, look at deadline.com, look at the Inevitable Foundation. They might have a list of productions that are happening. Look at Hollywood Reporter, Variety Insight. If you're a member, do the membership. Those kind of things also help to know if where you are welcomed and people are searching and looking for you. So just want to put that out there.
Mm-hmm.
About the last question, let's talk about representation, agents and managers. That came up a couple times. What would you say, at what point do you really need to find a manager? And Clay, I would love to hear from you, because you've been doing it such a long time. Did you ever try to have a manager to help you secure a staff writer role?
I tried multiple times to get representation over the years, and never could. You would think that I'm on a route to get scripts, to get paid for writing, and the truth is that a lot of agents don't see value in script coordinators, which I don't understand. And I was able to secure a manager just through a series of good luck and through connections, I guess, right after I got hired on iCarly. So no, I mean, yeah, you don't need representation to get a support staff job, but having a support staff job doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to get representation.
I would say, especially when you're first starting out, to try to worry less about that, because you're going to create your own opportunities for yourself by, getting yourself in the door on that show and impressing with your awesomeness and your ideas. And that's what, in getting yourself a writing opportunity on a show is, what will hopefully eventually, get some interest from representation. Usually, yeah.
Right, and to add, you can get staff from script coordinator to staff writer without representation, because the writers like you, they know you're capable and they want to hire you, and then you can use that maybe to get representation. But I just think reality is, I don't think agents are going to want to try to send you out on meetings, and they're not going to want you to be maybe working as support staff, because they're going to want to be sitting out on meetings that you won't be able to do as a support staff.
And then thank you so much, Clay. And then Debbie, just lastly, the importance of final draft. Can you just talk about that? Because people usually want to know, what software do you need to know?
Sure. I would say the majority of shows use final draft. I've been on shows that use Movie Magic Screenwriter. And, I was able to, pick that up pretty quickly. I also, took a friend out to coffee to have him show me his tricks in the course of 45 minutes so that I would, you know, be able to quickly get up to speed. I'm not really, I know there's a bunch of other programs out there that some shows use. I think Final Draft is just paramount in terms of knowing how to use it and knowing, and there's tons of tutorials now that Final Draft has online. So the more you can familiarize yourself with the skills that you need in formatting, you know, to do a good job as a script coordinator, the better off you'll be. You know, I think it is very important to be well versed in Final Draft. It's less important as a writer's assistant on a drama, but on a comedy, as Clay said, you become a little bit interchangeable and you will have to project your screen. And it is typically the script coordinator who's working with the script itself when you're making changes on a projected screen, but it might be the writer's assistant sometimes too. So just really good to do your best to arm yourself.
And I'll add that I know that Final Draft is expensive and you may not have Final Draft. If you were to get hired as a writer's assistant without Final Draft, it's so common for people to go to production and say, hey, can you just get everyone the latest Final Draft? And they will hook you up with Final Draft in most cases. And then keep in mind that you have several weeks of work before you really transition to any documents that even use Final Draft. So you get hired as a writer assistant. For the first 4 weeks, you're probably working in Word or Google Docs, and you can use that time to practice with Final Draft at home so that when they do start working in the scripts, you've had some experience, you've had some practice.
Absolutely. And there's also a whole community of writers, assistants, and script coordinators that's become stronger and stronger thanks to unionization, that, you know, when you have questions, people are right there, you know, to help you out if there's, you know, some tricky thing you're encountering that you can't figure out.
Absolutely. Well, Debbie and Clay, thank you so much. There's a lot to take from this conversation. Stay the course, everybody. It's a long road. Sometimes, you know, it happens right away. Sometimes it doesn't. That doesn't mean what's meant for you is going to pass you by. Everyone will get what's due to them at the right time. And so with that being said, along your journey, as y'all were saying, be prepared. If you're a writer, always be writing. Have a sample. You never know when you'll get that opportunity. Keep your eyes and ears open. Use your resources. There's so many resources that were put in this chat today, including HiveMind. Like, we're here for you. We want you to win. The Writers Guild Foundation wants you to win. There's so many, the program, please apply. You know, and there's so many opportunities for you out there. So please do not give up. And please make sure to follow us at the HiveMind Unified on Instagram, the HiveMindUnified.org. We do have office hours. Maybe Clay and Debbie, we can get you on our office hours too. If you ever have any questions, people schedule that on their own, and you're able to, there's so many amazing questions in the Q&A we didn't get a chance to get to, but you can ask those questions to us, and we're happy to talk with you one-on-one for 15 minutes at a time. And again, check out all of the amazing resources that the Writers Guild Foundation provides. And by the way, with Final Draft, we just had come off of our annual summit, the Unseen Insight Summit, and Final Draft was a partner. They did offer our members a slight discount, 35% off, not too bad. If you use Hive22 exclamation mark, you can get a discount so that you don't have to wait to get into the room. You can start that process now. So with that being said, Shirlyn, we did it again. I think this is going to be the close of our workshop season. We're going to take a little summer break. Sandra in the back, thank you. And of course, Kira from the Writers Guild Foundation, thank you so much for partnering with us on this. And hopefully we'll do this again, because we need to, we need to keep up these conversations. So I think that's it.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for coming.
Good luck, everybody.
Yeah.
Yes.
Stay in touch, y'all.
Yeah, may the force be with you.
And for those who stayed, y'all got that little code. You see what happens when you
stay
through the whole Zoom. You save 35%. That's what the HiveMind brings you. That is insane. You weren't ready.
I didn't even know it was coming.
All right. Oh my God.
Wait, when's the deadline
Um,
for your program?
That's
June
Kira.
6th.
Okay.
Thank
June
you,
6th,
Ariel.
that's right.
Yeah, I thought it was June 6th.
I was like, oh,
Okay,
wait,
that's important, y'all. Don't be missing no
Get
deadlines.
those applications in.
I'm like, that definitely key to making in the writer's room. Do not miss the deadline. Crucial. Like, I don't work in the writer's room, but I know that much.
Yes. There's a link as well that Kira had provided. She can provide it again because that is in all caps, Tony. I see it. I'll apply for the program. Don't gotta yell at us, but I'm gonna provide it for you. Yeah. I think I'll just here.
Tony, we got you.
Yes, you can apply from anywhere. You don't have to be in the US to apply. You just have to
that's
be
a good
available
question.
during the class time.
That is a good question. You don't have to live in New York or LA, the main hubs, correct?
Nope, we had people from all over in the programs last year.
Yes. A recording will
maybe if you get
Okay.
it, you may moving to LA may be ultimately become something necessary for certain jobs. So
okay. Yes. If for any reason the code don't work, it should work. Just reach out. It should.
Yeah,
I was
Kira,
going
we're
off
gonna
the top.
All
It
right.
should work.
Yep, we're good, Kira.
yep.
Great. Thanks all. Have a great evening.
thanks,
Yeah.
you too.
Yes. Have a great evening,
Right.
y'all.
Good night.